We are on to transportation, and I believe that Karen has a presentation for us regarding transportation.
Yep. Again, there is an item in your packet, 7B. It lists 4 options. Patty and I had some conversations after we put this together, and option 1, actually, we can take off. We currently are using 6 buses to do our Manchester kids, but they're going to 2 different high schools. So we have 2 runs that are duplicates. So we're actually, technically, if it was only 1 high school in Manchester, we would only be using 4 buses. So we wouldn't need to use 6 buses to go to another high school. So we can remove option 1. Option 2 has us doing 4 buses and doing pretty similarly to what we do from the Manchester kids, going throughout the town, picking up at locations throughout the town. We're not picking every child up at their house, but we are, picking up in neighborhoods and such. It looks like worst case scenario, the routes could be about 45 minutes long. That is all going to depend on where the students are located. If we're picking up at one end of town and then we got to go all the way to the other end, obviously it's going to be a little bit longer.
Karen, just real quick, are these mixing the Manchester routes, or is this?
No, this would be separate, only because of the time difference, John. It's a half an hour difference. We'd have those Manchester kids on the buses a half an hour earlier.
Right.
And then what do we do with them for a half an hour? Because we can't drop them off in Manchester too early.
Right.
So this would be separate buses for the second high school.
Yeah, Karen, I was actually going to say, in the interim, I'd actually spoken with some friends of ours from Auburn, and Auburn the first year did both sets of kids on one bus, and so at the front end, the Pinkerton kids get there early, and the Manchester kids have to wait, and then on the back end, it works in reverse because of the
Right.
different schedules, so that's why it didn't work for them.
Right, it's a
Right.
real nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can imagine being a bus driver and having high school kids sitting on your bus in the morning that didn't want to get up, first of all, at that ungodly hour to get on the bus, and now they're going to be sitting there waiting. It's just not,
Yep.
it's not a good situation at
Yep.
all.
Go ahead.
You have a question?
Yeah, I do, but if you're not finished, I'll wait.
All right, I just didn't know if you wanted me to go over the rest of the options or not.
Well, do we think that in year 1 of having students going to Pinkerton, that we would need 4 buses? Like,
We could possibly not need 4. It's all going to depend on where those kids live. If we have the kids, if they're mostly down the southern end of Hooksett, and there's, only 50 kids we need to do, then obviously we could do that with 1, maybe 2 buses.
okay, but we should
But,
prepare for.
yeah, right, so every scenario is a worst-case scenario, and if we can find out in time how many kids are going to go to the other school, if we're going to provide transportation to them, and where they live, we can whittle down how many buses we need. But we also going to need to give the bus company enough notice to get additional buses for us, so it's going to be kind of a little bit tricky.
Karen, which one of these scenarios do we do with the Manchester kids currently, which would most likely closely reflect what we're doing now?
It would be option 2. But we use 6 buses, like I said, because we have the 2 high schools.
Right.
But we go, a good amount of the town, we travel with the buses and pick the kids up at various locations.
Okay.
There are some that have to get driven to where the bus stops are, but there are others that it's close enough for them to walk.
And currently the kids, it's like $50 a semester, right, to take the bus to high school?
Yes, for a bus pass, right.
And that doesn't matter how many times you use it, it's $50. If you're a morning kid, it's $50. If you're both, it's $50.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Karen, cost-wise, was it $46,000 a bus that you gave us a couple of weeks ago?
Yes, it's a little bit over 46,000 for next year. I have it right here dated. It's 47,406.60 for next year.
So if we just times that by 4, that's really the cost for all of these last 3 plans? Is that?
Yes, if we needed the 4 buses, yes.
And that's the only 3 options we have now, right? So basically,
Right.
cost-wise, these all 3 would be the same? Or is there any other factor in there that,
Nope, they would all pretty much be the same cost-wise.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So option 3, again, uses the 4 buses, but we determined some designated stops, 3 or 4, in certain parts of Hooksett, so that the buses aren't traveling as far, and the kids aren't on the buses as long, but they would have to get that transportation down to wherever those stops would be. And then the last one would be doing just one centralized stop, getting the number of buses we need to get there to get the kids onto, into Derry, if that's the school they decide to go to, and then the parents would have to get them there and then pick them up in the afternoon. So like I said, the number of buses is certainly going to just be dependent upon how many kids choose to go to that anchor school.
Yes, Cheryl?
Option 4, how does that affect the afternoon release for Collie?
They would be, we use the upper parking lot
Oh, you
here,
use the
like we do for the Londonderry kids, so it wouldn't affect the traffic, and these buses wouldn't be used for any other runs, so.
I'm just wondering, I don't really know what the time frame is. Because that obviously would probably be favorable to most families because the kids don't have to get up as long, they're not on the bus as long. However, I would see that the afternoon may cause a problem for families trying to go to that centralized location to pick up for work schedules, things of that nature.
Mhm.
They probably can't load the buses with the middle school kids. It probably wouldn't be, again, I'm thinking out loud here. As I'm
Oh.
asking the question, I'm going, wait, that really wouldn't work because now you're putting high schoolers on
With middle school.
with middle schoolers, and that probably wouldn't be,
And I'm not sure we would get here in time
okay, the timing
to
also
do
would be
that,
off.
because the traffic down in Derry is pretty rough at release time
Okay.
and drop-off time, so I don't know, do they get out here at 2:30? Is dismissal? 2:35?
And is there
Okay,
any reason we
so-
can't mix and match these? Like if we used a centralized location in the morning and so then maybe it looks like the afternoons would be the longer ride back.
Mhm. Yeah, you could
Could
take the
kinda-
morning of option 2
Right.
and the afternoon of option 3 or something, sure.
I'm just thinking,
Because these buses would be just specifically for this purpose, so we could, mix and match,
okay.
whatever makes the most sense.
Yes, Mr. Braun?
So, Karen, I'm coming up with 196,000 would be our 4-bus price, if I did my math right. And there's no more, I think you already said this, but I'm just trying to confirm it. So there's no more cost in going further into these neighborhoods than to just stop at Collie.
There might be a little bit of an additional cost if we use more fuel and the fuel price is higher, so, but it would be a minimal additional cost for fuel adjustment.
And one question I have is, when these kids are let off, I'm assuming they're let out of the bus at Collie when it arrives, and the bus driver would then leave?
Yes.
So I guess I'm a little concerned of who's responsible for those kids in the
Their
parking lot.
parents.
Your parents.
But, so there's no school supervision or bus company supervision after the drop-off?
Right.
I have to say, I do parent pickup every afternoon, and Londonderry is dropped off in the back parking lot. I've only ever seen 3 kids I know to be high school kids walk from the back parking lot anywhere near the parent pickup, and all 3 kids I saw got into a car that was already in the parent pickup line to go home, and it was the day it was pouring rain, and the kids were moving fast because it was raining hard, and we weren't releasing kids in this building out, but there were kids that walked to get on into their parents' cars who were in the parent pickup line. I've never seen it or heard of a problem, and I'm in the parking lot every day. I watch the Londonderry bus go back, I watch the Londonderry bus leave, I watch all the parents go by with 4 to 5 kids. I know logistically for some parents, and the reason that you see 3 to 4 kids in every car that goes by is a lot of parents are working with high school age kids, so a centralized location is creating some stress on parents who are working parents. They carpool with other parents, like a parent who has to be to work at 7:30 in the morning is taking a carload of kids to Collie, so their friend who gets out later can pick them up.
Another question I have is, and I guess this is not really Karen's question, but more of a policy question. It's my understanding that right now, if kids want to, they can ride the Trinity bus. They ride our bus and get off at Trinity. Is that,
Do we have any kids going to Trinity? Okay.
Oh.
If they. Right, right.
We would
Currently, we
allow
don't have anybody. If we did and they wanted to ride the bus, they could, and they would get on that bus that goes by Trinity and get dropped off. So they would have to find where that bus, one of the stops closest to their home. We wouldn't make a separate stop for them at their home for that.
and then do we pick them up if they were at Trinity? in
We
the
would if
afternoon?
they needed us to, yep.
Okay. I guess the reason I'm asking that is, as we're trying to figure out this whole big picture of transportation, we already have a large, I would say a sizable number of kids going to Londonderry. And I guess I'm trying to answer the question, if a Londonderry parent said, well, you're using district transportation dollars to drop somebody at Trinity, which is a private school, but we're getting no help. I guess I'm trying to figure out, I know it's not a large cost to go to Trinity, it's close, but still it's the same factor.
And that's a statutory requirement, that the law requires us to provide the same level of transportation. So if we're traveling to Central and your youngster goes to Trinity, theoretically, we have the obligation to bring that Trinity kid to Central. But why would we do that if we can stop along the way when we're going right by? So it's a question of, since Trinity is along the way to where we're taking our kids anyway, then by statute, we have to provide them with that same service.
And because Trinity is in Manchester, if Trinity were in another community, we would not have to do it. But because Trinity is in the community that our high school of record is in, then we're required to.
All right, so we have some
statutorily.
standing to do it.
Right.
That's what I wasn't.
Right.
Statutory requirement, yeah.
Yep.
Mr. Liscar?
So on a follow-up on that, if we maintain 2 high schools and a child was attending a private school in Derry, would we have to give them a ride?
Well, it's an excellent question. First of all, you don't have to transport anybody. So that's an issue that you'd have to address. But if a youngster were attending a private school in Derry, a Hooksett youngster, and I don't know of any, and that high school was on the way to Pinkerton Academy, we would be required to let the kid ride that bus and drop the kid off. Well, no, would be required to bring the kid to Pinkerton.
So that's the statute? It's
Same level of service,
so you don't give them a ride to their school? No.
same level of service. I've seen communities where they would, in fact, pick up from the community, bring the private school youngsters to the high school, and then the parents have rented a minibus or something else to take them from the high school to the private school. In our case, though, it just turns out that Trinity is along the route to Central. In fact, I did get into a little argument in one of our other communities with a parent who was quoting me that law, whose child was attending a school beyond Central, and was telling me that we had to transport the youngster there, and we don't. Because that would be an extended level of service. It would be above and beyond what the public school youngsters are getting.
Yes, Mr. Dembo?
I'd like to make a motion that we provide, continue to provide transportation to Manchester kids through 2018.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion?
I thought,
Or Manchester High School students, sure. 2018?
That sounds awfully familiar. Did we already vote on that at a previous meeting? No?
Well, my question to that motion is, can we really bind the board for the next 3 years? If we pass this motion and next year a different board sits here and says, we're not gonna transport to Manchester, does that motion really stand past this?
No.
Okay. So,
I mean, if they decided to, you know, a subsequent board can undo the actions of a previous board.
right, so I would support that motion, Mr. Dembo, if it said, you know, we continue to transport to Manchester. I'm just a little hesitant to put 218 in there if it has no authority, because I think it just sends the wrong message that maybe we're going to stop in 2018, or maybe, or that a board can't undo it. I would certainly support a motion that said we're going to continue to transport to Manchester, and then let future boards take up that question as situation changes.
I mean, David, at the end of the day, my intent was to, obviously, because for kids that started up through this year, we promised them transportation, you know what I mean, as part of our agreement with Manchester. So I'm just looking to fulfill that obligation to those kids. So however we go about doing that, I'm fine. Again, just wanted to make sure that people obviously made those decisions based on the fact that their kids are going to be transported, and I want to make sure that during the transition period, we do that. Ideally, you do that, and then, you know, again, whatever your anchor school is at that time, you continue to provide transportation there, whatever. That's fine. Whatever way does it for us, I'm fine, David.
Well, I'm not sure that we promised in the Manchester agreement that we were going to transport kids to Manchester through 2018. I might be wrong, but I don't.
I'm doing it because I think it's the right thing to do, is what
Well,
I'm saying.
I understand that, Mr. Dembo, but I just don't want to mischaracterize what the board has done. I don't think that we made any promise for transportation through 2018. I would make a motion to amend Mr. Dembo's motion to say that we will continue to transport high school students to Manchester.
I'll second that.
And for discussion, just for the reasons that I just mentioned, I think it's a better description of what we're doing and the fact that we can't bind future boards.
Will there be no further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0 for the amendment. Is there any more discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0.
We're back talking about the,
Mr.
Proposal.
Dembo, did you have your question?
No, I'm just, again, just thinking, obviously, we're looking at these options and try to select an option here for,
I'd like to make a motion.
I
The-
have further discussion if you.
Okay.
I'm trying to put myself in the position of parents, and I think, you know, if it's no additional cost, I'd certainly rather have the more comprehensive bus run, even if it adds some time, because that time is going to be time that they're going to have to drive in their car anyway, maybe a little shorter, but these are some things that I think we should, well, and let me ask this. If we made a motion to commit to 4 buses, is there any urgency to commit to one of these particular plans? Okay, so that's good to get that out of the way. I am concerned about $196,000 going into the budget, and I guess what I'm think that we should be careful of here is, you know, what happens if we approve 4 buses for Pinkerton and the contract fails with the voters, are we going to pull back on the buses to Pinkerton, or are we going to transport students that are allowed to get into Pinkerton by other means than a contract? So I just think that this should somehow be tied to the fact that the contract is approved. Otherwise, and this is what I'm not sure Karen might say, is, you said that we need time to get these buses, and we're talking March for the vote. But what if we say yes to these buses and then the vote is no?
That would still give us time to
March
let the
would-
bus company know that we don't need, I wouldn't let them know until after the vote whether we needed the buses or not, and we should have plenty of time to have them in time for the start of school if we let them know shortly thereafter from the vote.
Well, I make a motion to table this item until we have further information. I think we're going to be hearing a lot in the next couple of weeks about the contract and the MOUs, and I think Karen has spelled out what our options here are, and we know the dollar figure, so I think we should wait to make, the decision at that time.
Did the table have a second?
Second that for discussion. Karen, David quoted something that sounded higher than what I came up with. Was it 47,406.60?
Yes,
So that times 4, I came up with 189,626.40.
yes, I come up with the same thing.
So that's a little bit lower than yours. I'm already saving money, Mr. Pearl.
Your math is better than mine, Mr. Liskars. But I did get Karen to agree to it.
Oh, it sounded close.
There being no further discussion, I'll call this motion to the table to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
No. I'd like to make a motion that we allocate the resources to allow for 4 buses to transport to Pinkerton. And based on the students, we determine which way is the best way to construct those bus routes, because we could, if I receive a second, I'll speak to my motion. Okay. what?
Second.
The motion was, I make a motion that we allocate the resources, allocate money in the budget to have 4 buses go to Pinkerton. 4 buses to transport students to Pinkerton. Yep, and I believe I received a second. Phil Dumbo. Thank you, Phil. I think, and I'll speak to my motion, I think that if we, based on the number of students and where they're located, a destination stop might make more sense, depending if there's a large group of kids that are attending it. If you have currently buses don't go up through a lot of neighborhoods, and if we have a lot of like we may have one bus that's a destination bus and one bus that goes through neighborhoods where the houses are further apart, whereas if you have a bus going up Hooksett Road and it's stopping at Campbell Hill, Carriage Hill, and Carrington Farm, I forgot one of my hills. Carriage Hill, that's a destination bus stop. That's not a neighborhood bus stop. That's stopping at the bottom of the hill. I think it depends on where the students live, what kind of bus runs we're looking at, where they live in the first year. So that's why I said that. Yes, Mr. Liskars.
So when I took a look at this, and we've already ruled out option 1, the 6 buses. Just having gone through this kind of decision this year, going down to Londonderry, I try to think of this in the parent and the kid's perspective. Stuff like doing homework at night and getting up in the morning to get ready, eat, get dressed, and make it out to the bus stop. So just the board, I want you to just consider option 2, route first starts pick up at 5:45. I just figure you got to give your kid about a half an hour to get ready, eat breakfast, get his stuff, and if he's good or she's good, she'll make it to that bus stop at 5:45. So that puts your child waking up at 5:15 a.m. The other thing to consider, if your child misses that bus, you're driving down to Pinkerton in this case. So that's option 2 for me. I wasn't so crazy about, just because of the early wake-up time. Option 3, out of these 3 that are left, I think is the best. Having the designated stops, and it's a little later. You're picking up at 6 a.m., so that means the child's getting up at 5:30. The only problem I had with that one that the board should consider is a safety issue. So if it's 3 designated stops and you're not there as a parent to pick them up, they're going to have to get home by walking or getting a ride from somebody else, so some kind of a carpool. So, but out of the 3, I think option 3 might be the best, because option 4, getting home to Cheryl's point is a good point. You know, when they get home at 2:40 and they're at Cawley, one of the reasons we didn't go with the bus this year is just because both of us work and we're on the other side of town. So you basically have to carpool in that instance. And so if we're providing bus service for the town, then I don't think we should be counting on people having to carpool. You know, our solutions should be able to get the child from the home to the school and back. So it's not the best, but I just think my input is option 3 out of the 3.
The motion didn't say which option to pick, it just said to appropriate the money, and that when we saw what the list looked like of students who are going to Pinkerton, then we would look at our best options, because the scenario I gave you with Hooksett Road, those are that's considered a destination bus run. Whereas if you live on the west side of the river and it's driving up Hackett Hill Road, that's not really a destination bus stop, that's a neighborhood bus stop. Yes, Mr. Liskars.
Yeah, my only point, Chair Corcus, is it was during discussion, you're deciding on a bus, and I wanted everybody that's in the public to know what the ramifications are of the 3 choices that are left and how that affects their child, because that's really what we need to be considering. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Pearl.
Well, I see, you know, option 4 having some potential savings, because if you have a centralized location, then you can clearly just go by the number of students. So if there was only enough kids to fit on 3 buses, we could drop a bus. If you're going with the routes, as Karen explained before, you've got to have a certain number of buses to make a certain number of routes, even if there's not that many kids on each bus, because it takes a certain amount of time to get around all those routes and to get back to where you're going. So, you know, I think in this budget year, we've really, every decision that we make, that's why I asked for the dollar figures here. We've got to look at how that's going to impact our budget. As we saw this afternoon, we're facing other costs. So I'm not supporting, you know, going for 4 buses at this point, because I think it is going to depend on, it could depend on which plan we take. There could be some cost savings if we go with option 4.
Yes, Cheryl.
I'd like to call a question.
Okay, do I have a second on calling the question? Thank you.
I'll second that.
All those in favor of calling the question, please signify by saying aye.
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 No.
Carries 4-1. Okay. Could you restate the motion, please, Leanne? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed?
No.
No.
Motion carries 3-2.